Reading Uni weather.
Hi there. In this forecast we're going to see more in the way of unsettled conditions, rain at times, and we're definitely feeling warmer by the weekend. And that's all thanks to this large area of low pressure dragging winds in from the far southwest. Last night we saw a band of rain pushing its way towards the Reading area and fizzling out in nature. So this afternoon it'll be much drier and brighter, and temperatures should creep up to 14 or 15 degrees Celsius. The same story continues tonight with another band of rain coming in from the southwest, this time a lot heavier, and it should hang around for a few hours. But again in the afternoon it'll be clearing out to the northeast, leaving a much drier and brighter story. Temperatures will be around the mid-teens, 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. As we head into Saturday, we can see that the rain is going to stay far to the north, and it'll be feeling much drier, and those winds will be really coming in off that southwest, so they get up to around 20 degrees Celsius or so. During the overnight period, if you're heading out to Union, it'll be around 14 or 13 degrees Celsius, and there'll be no rain in the forecast. So more interestingly, we've seen some weird synoptic pressure maps lately, and if this doesn't look familiar, well, look again closely, as it might have some shocking surprises.
Hello, welcome to this week's weather news, and this week we're going to be talking about El Niño. Now you may have heard about El Niño. It's been a prominent feature in our weather throughout the whole of this year, and it's continuing to rage on in the Central Pacific. So firstly we're going to take a look at what is El Niño. Well, El Niño occurs in the Central Pacific, so looking at what normally happens, we usually have two regions of high pressure, one that sits just off the west coast of North America and another one that persists just off the west coast of South America. Now these two regions of high pressure bring in what is known as the trade winds, which blow in an easterly direction across the Central Pacific normally during non-El Niño years. But what happens during an El Niño year is, well, those trade winds, they weaken, and as a result we start to see warmer temperatures creep in across the Central Pacific, and when that happens we then sometimes get westerly winds that accompany those warming temperatures, which raise the temperatures even further. And when we get this perfect coupling between the atmosphere and the ocean temperatures, we get what is called an El Niño. So what are the impacts of El Niño? Well, El Niño being such a strong warming event in the Central Pacific, that warming event has a very strong impact on weather patterns around the world. So in places such as South America, we have much wetter conditions than what you'd normally experience. Across parts of North America and Canada, however, it is much drier and much warmer than it would normally be. And across the southern states, we get this much stronger subtropical jet stream racing across the country, bringing much cooler and more unsettled conditions as well. Now, the flip side of that jet stream across the southern states of America means that we have less hurricanes in the Atlantic during the hurricane season during the autumn. But in the Pacific Ocean, the opposite thing happens. We start to see more hurricanes occurring, or typhoons as they're known, in the Pacific, causing problems for parts like Asia. Also in parts of Australia and Indonesia we see much warmer dry conditions also, and we see much weaker Indian monsoons. Now there's been a lot of chit-chat about this El Niño and previous ones gone by. The strongest of course was the one in 1997, and this schematic behind me, as I'll just step out the way, illustrates the changes in temperature we saw in the Central Pacific during both 1997 and 98 El Niño and this current El Niño up until last week. So as we can see, 1997 was a very, very strong event, but as we see this year we've got some very strong abnormal warming going on, particularly around the west coast of North America, which is quite unusual in itself. So what impacts have we seen in 2015 from this year's strong El Niño event? Well, we've seen much less rainfall across parts of India from the much weaker monsoon. We've also seen an increase in typhoon activity in the Pacific due to those warmer sea surface temperatures fueling those hurricanes. And in particular note, Hurricane Patricia last week became the strongest ever hurricane in the Eastern Pacific, and that was again thanks to those very warm sea surface temperatures that have been persisting across the Eastern Pacific, partly due to El Niño. And this year is also going to be a record breaker in terms of global temperatures, with this year to be the hottest year on record again. So those were the global impacts we've seen from El Niño this year, but what does it mean for Europe and the UK this winter? Well, the media have been quite speculative in saying it's going to be the coldest winter for 50 years, 100 years, ever. But in reality, El Niño is not really fully understood and what its impacts are over Europe, and El Niño forms a very small part of the interconnections that influence our winter every year. However, there is some possibility from recent research that El Niño does increase the likelihood of stratospheric warming events. Now, these warming events do sometimes bring colder weather to parts of Europe and the UK and even sometimes North America. However, it's difficult and too far ahead to say at this stage exactly what will happen. So that brings us to the end of this week's weather news. I've been Ashley. Enjoy the rest of your week.